Hey everyone, and welcome back to another industry report. Today it's a really fun one because we now know one of the reasons why Stadia is actually failing. It is clear that Stadia does not make much sense to us as potential customers, but as the Epic Games Store does show us, even if the customer side of something isn't ideal, a platform can still grow if it manages to secure enough content, and does that by offering lucrative enough deals to publishers and devs. Well, a new report has revealed just how bad a game Google is playing. And just to tease your appetite with a fun little statistic, because I was curious, and it's got Stadia coming in at 0% of activity. Now, if that's them rounding to the nearest whole number, yeah, that indicates that Stadia accounts for under 0.5% of Destiny 2 activity. And considering that all Stadia Pro tier members had it, and the Pro 3-month trial has now ended, ouch. Okay, so we do 3 of these videos a week, game industry news topics, so hit that sub button if you want some more. Also, mailing list for our game studio, that's what we are. You can check that out down below, and I believe there's a mail going out today or tomorrow that'll show you a little bit of behind the scenes. And finally, if you want to support what we're doing, that like button seriously helps with the algorithm, and we really appreciate it. Okay, with that, let's get into the news. Google Stadia released in November with 22 games, and that's even after they added 10 new launch titles at the last minute. But since then, of course, it's all good because the Stadia library is now swelled to a whopping 28 games. 120 are apparently hitting this year. 10 of those are said to be exclusives, but beyond the likes of Cyberpunk 2077 and Doom Eternal, we don't really know what is coming. That's something that's been a little bit controversial with the Stadia community. So, where are the games? Well, Business Insider published an investigation asking several prominent developers and publishers why their games are not on Stadia, and they gave 2 main reasons. Google did not offer them enough money, and they don't trust Google to actually stick with gaming in the long term. Now, the issues boil down to just a lack of incentive and a lack of faith in Google. One dev told Business Insider that the Stadia team had approached them, but that the incentive was kind of non-existent. And kind of non-existent, that's a quote, right? Another confessed that Google's financial offer was, quote, so low that it wasn't even part of the conversation. Now, with only 4 of the 28 games falling under the indie banner, it's pretty clear that Google have so far failed to appeal to smaller developers who really could bulk up their catalog. And while, you know, it's not solely financial, right? Money is undeniably going to be a part of an equation there. A prominent indie developer told them that when they look at these kind of deals, what the dev is looking for is funding and security, right? Does the agreement afford the team the resources they need to keep the lights on? Or, you know, is it an exclusivity agreement that maybe gives the team some longer term security, such as, you know, like what Epic would have been doing? Google currently, though, are offering neither. So that's the finances looking terrible. But what about the other great benefits of signing up with a platform? I mean, right, there's more to money, surely. Well, there sort of is. One dev, highlighting Steam and Nintendo Switch, told Business Insider there are platforms that you want to be on because they have an audience and you want to reach that audience. So, guess what doesn't have an audience, unlike Switch and Steam? Stadia. So right now, Stadia just makes no sense to devs and publishers. They do not appear to be handing out those epic-sized, studio-supporting sums of money that give people genuinely job security, nor are they bringing an audience that's actually worth bothering with. And I actually think that's compounded upon something where basically right now, few people are going to be using Stadia exclusively as a platform, and that does mean that most of that, you know, market of Stadia players, well, they're addressable via other storefronts because they have other things. You know, most platforms know about that problem, and they'll maybe offer studios the expected sales for their game across all platforms, and then some extra on top for exclusivity. That's what Epic would have done. That's what they did do to secure content on their platform, but not Google. So why, right? Surely if any company was, you know, to be willing to splash out to, you know, actually carve up some market share, it would be Google with all of their resources. Well, who knows? The Stadia team may have just been given a limited budget. Maybe that budget has been entirely spent on acquiring talent and studios like Typhoon, making their studio. And while sure, those long-term things are important and getting that talent is really good for actually preparing a platform for launch, well, Stadia is already out and it's clearly not ready. So I guess it just seems insane to me that they're not spending to secure content for their platform. And I think that's insane from a risk point of view because their long-term plans are really expensive and really risky. They're buying studios. I think they're founding studios as well. They've got Jade Raymond in there doing a bunch of work. That is major long-term investment. So it seems to me insane that they do all that long-term investment, but then shoot that investment in the foot by not giving Stadia a strong launch. Now, I get they've got their 120 games this year, but if that is so, then that should have kicked off in November when the service actually launched. Not, what, March or later? I mean, thinking about the deal that customers got, it's just a really bad look. They hyped up their vision for the future of gaming, they got loads of expensive pre-orders, but they probably knew how light their content lineup would be, and they sold people down the river. You know, and losing those indies is really key here. I mean, AAA games, they only come around every so often, so bulking that service up with indies would have been a really good strategy. Just look at Epic and their, the free games they've been giving out. I mean, sure, maybe you can't use a single indie as a massive marketing push, but certainly do what that would be value delivered to Stadia customers, and that's what matters right now. Perhaps them not following up on such an obvious plan indicates that something didn't go to plan at Google, that they do have problems. Either that, or they are just blinded by their vision and are forgetting about their product. But funnily enough, and of course not that surprisingly, that's not all. Going back to the report, many developers also just don't have faith in Google as a company, that they'll actually still even be working on Stadia in a year. Business Insider notes that this concern, quote, was repeatedly brought up, unprompted by every single person they spoke to for the piece. Google are known for walking away from services when they no longer seem to be worthwhile. Just look at the Google graveyard, it is massive. So with Stadia's launch being pretty rocky, it's not unimaginable that one day they would just send Stadia to the Google graveyard. And if you're signed up on that platform with an exclusive, that would be very bad for you as a dev. And just that reputation is not good for trust, especially in an industry that does require long-term investment. And Google are obviously doing little to assure developers and publishers of their commitment. Now, after reaching out to Google for comment on all of this stuff, Business Insider did receive word from Stadia representative Patrick Seybold. Now, Seybold spouted the usual marketing blurb, praising Google's very supportive existing relationships with developers and publishers, and promising more games are incoming for the platform, which technically is true. They have said their 120 will be coming out. Now, Seybold also forwarded a list of Stadia's main publishing partners, which does include the likes of EA, Bethesda, Ubisoft, and Rockstar. Of course, those are all big AAAs, yet seemingly, well, there's a weak showing across other segments of the market. Now, for indie devs launching with an exclusive in Stadia, that would be an extremely risky proposition because of that audience loss, right? And, not only is that not compensated for by the financial deals that Google have been offering, from what we understand, but it also reduces a studio's ability to build out its reach and its brand identity as a studio. And that's very important for the future of any studio. So yeah, that's just really bad for Google. I suppose, there's that. Also, it could just be that maybe Google are extremely AAA focused with their deal making. I guess it could be that as well. We really have no idea, though, what the deals would look like for AAAs, but I guess that, for a lot of these companies, the AAAs, this is a way to get their foot in the door with streaming. I mean, just look at Doom Eternal. Id ended up developing a whole bunch of streaming tools for that game. Perhaps the single game risk and the proportional cost of going on the Stadia is just higher for indies, and maybe Stadia has been trying to lock indies with an exclusivity deal that's not worth it, because they're clearly not doing exclusivity deals for AAA tier games. I think they would know that that would be a very unrealistic thing. Really, though, something like Untitled Goose Game, being real with you, that's a good example of the kind of game that Google Stadia is lacking for its platform, right? It launched on PC as an Epic Game Store exclusive, took advantage of that big upfront deal, and of course the increased, revenue split that secured a lot of funding for that company, and this likely did offset Epic's audience being smaller than Steam's. Not that that seemed to have mattered massively for Goose Game in particular, which hit memedom and then exploded, but I imagine the Switch is actually a really large part of why that did well. But as you can see, though, that's just an example of Epic doing some deal making that probably worked out for them. And Google have not been willing to make those deals, and it's obviously not working out well for Google. Now, I want to be very clear here. This is not me being pro-exclusives. This is just me realistically talking about business and incentives and what you actually need to do to secure content for your platform so that your platform even makes sense in the first place for customers to be on. Now, I suppose the one thing that I will say there is, in a way, Stadia does provide more unique value than Epic, but also Stadia is a paid product, unlike the Epic storefront, you know, in that like Stadia does do the streaming stuff and isn't just a storefront. So I could maybe see Google trying to say that like the unique thing they bring is their streaming stuff, and that should be enough for you to want to be on their platform. But that is obviously not enough to shift loads of developers, as we see in this report. And then also for Goose Game, we hear something on platforms that, well, you will have recognized from earlier on in this video, and that is Goose Game was also a Switch console exclusive. So Nintendo probably provided a financial incentive for that initial exclusivity, but then the scope of the Switch's audience and the console's just overall tone made it a perfect fit for Goose Game, leading to incredible sales, over 1 million copies across all platforms. And sure, it was a popular game, but when it came to, you know, the business development side of things, that side of making games, which is a very important side of making games, less so to the customer, but if companies die, then the customer does get no games. But obviously from the biz dev side, there was a bunch of deals there that made a lot of sense for that dev. And clearly Stadia are not able to position themselves to actually get those deals with the people that they're talking to. And because of that, it's pretty clear that Stadia are just not making themselves a hot platform that people want to be on. There's just no real upside. Stadia is now 4 months into its life, and it's done little to deliver on this big future that it promised. You know, so far it's offered little to developers beyond just being first in their platform, and the audience just isn't there. Now, Stadia will continue to struggle, I think, unless it finds a way to appeal to developers and publishers. After all, if Stadia can't entice developers to support its platform, then why the hell should players get involved, right? I mean, having rocky streaming quality for 28 games, that sure as hell is not a tantalizing prospect there, I know that much. As always, content is king, and Google seem to have forgotten that very simple fact. What's, I think, worrying to me, though, is hearing all of this in the sort of wider context, especially like Stadia's recent self-defense, where, you know, they said that things are actually going great and that it's all about the vision, the long-term goal. Now, given the reality of Stadia, that just seems out of touch and delusional. Now, this is where it all comes into a theme that is just pervasive, and that is balance. How platforms need to strike a balance between the developer, the customer, and the publisher, and how that is basically the core to everyone being happy enough to get by. What does a dev want? Well, to know that, we've got to understand the financial arrangements devs work under. Now, look, I am talking about my own experience here. I'm talking about no specific deal, though, okay? I will say what I'm about to say is extremely common terms that I've seen in real-world scenarios multiple times. A dev will probably have a 60-40 flip or a 70-30 flip. So if it was 60-40, then the dev would get 40% of revenue until the publisher has recouped their investment, and then after that, the dev would get 60%. Maybe it's a 70-30 flip, but whatever, you get the point. So a dev will want to flip that rev share as fast as they can, and that means getting good sales, a good split, or a good deal with a platform. Right now, Google seem to offer none of those things, especially since their audience is tiny, and that means that it's not going to make any sense as compared to, say, Epic, which will be able to get you sort of good in your rev split. Now, for customers, well, the customer is investing in a platform, but unlike with GeForce Now or xCloud, Stadia games are Stadia games. You'll have to rebuy them if you want to play them on other platforms. Not the case with GeForce Now or xCloud, and that makes Stadia's use case extremely limited. Plus, as we've covered before, the economics of Stadia just don't really make that much sense, nor is the experience perfect. So overall, I think you can see how Stadia just doesn't make that much sense for publishers, developers, or customers. Google could change, right? And this could end up being a strong thing in a year. It could be that they were just super behind on their deal making, but if these recent reports are anything to go by, then they've just not been offering much of interest to the devs and the publishers, and if they don't do that, fundamentally there'll be no content and no reason for any of us to bother. And I think, as evidenced by those Destiny 2 player numbers I joked about at the start of this video, I think it's pretty darn clear no one's bothering. So, have you bothered? Let me know down below. What's your experience been like? What would actually get you to go do Stadia? What would get you to use that? Let me know. Thank you for watching this video. I'll see you next time.